Welcome to section 1-3, properties of numbers. Now, there's going to be a lot of things that we're going to be talking about today in these properties of numbers. And later on, when we get ready for the quiz, I'm going to give you a way to study these so you know which ones are which, okay? But for right now, we're just going to quickly go over the different types of properties. And I will highlight the ones that are more important for us to focus on. So for now, let's talk about the reflexive property is so basic. It just means that if you see here, it says that's our example, 5 equals 5. Okay, that's obvious. A lot of these are very obvious. Symmetric property, it says if 8 equals 2 plus 6, then that means 2 plus 6 equals 8. So it doesn't matter the order that they're written in. That's very similar to our commutative property, which is one of the more important properties that we're going to be talking about. So a bunch of these right now are things that we're just, like I said, I'm just going to throw them out at you, but we don't really have to do a whole lot with them. So the transitive property says that if one quantity equals a second quantity and the second quantity equals a third quantity, then the first quantity equals the third quantity, okay? So if one quantity equals another quantity, then and the second quantity equals a third, then they equal each other. All of them equal each other. Okay, again, not something we need to focus a lot of time on. All right, the substitution property says that if A equals B, then you can replace A with B at any given time or B with A because they're equivalent. You can replace them with each other. Now, this is where we actually start working on some stuff here. We have the additive identity. Okay, so that additive identity is 0. If I add 0 to any number, I don't change the value, it's still that number. So 2 plus 0 equals 2. Okay, so that's the additive identity. So now we're getting into some things that might be a little more important. Then we also have the additive inverse. Now what that means is if you take 3 plus its opposite, 3 plus -3, you get 0. So it gets you back to that identity number. Okay, so we have the additive identity and the additive inverse, and they both go together. Then we have the multiplicative identity and the multiplicative property of 0 and the multiplicative inverse. So this is all the yellow highlighted ones we're all dealing with addition. These are all dealing with multiplication. Now the multiplicative identity is the number that we multiply by and it doesn't change it. That multiplicative identity is 1 because 14 times 1 is equal to 14. It doesn't change it. Okay, now skip down here and we get the multiplicative inverse. So what do you multiply by in order to get back to that multiplicative identity? So 4/5 times its reciprocal equals 1. So when you did the additive inverse, it was the opposite. When you have the multiplicative inverse, you have the reciprocal. So we have the reciprocal and we have the opposite. And those two things will get us back to those respective identities. Okay, now, so what are we going to do with this information? Well, first of all, I guess let's cover these last couple of properties. Okay, so, and again, these are super important ones. So let's highlight these. The commutative property says the order in which you add or multiply numbers does not change the sum or product. Here's our example. So 4 plus 8 is equal to 8 plus 4. It doesn't matter the order that we add them. It doesn't matter the order that we multiply, we still get the same value. Now notice its commutative property works for addition and multiplication, but it does not work for subtraction or division. Okay, now the other one that we're going to discuss here is the associative property. So that's, oh, gray is maybe not my best color for that. Let's try another one. Here we go. So we have the associative property says that the way you group 3 or more numbers when adding or multiplying does not change their sum or product. So remember that grouping tells us which numbers to do first, because when we use PEMDAS, we do parentheses first. So in this case, we have 3 plus 5 in parentheses plus 7. If I would do the parentheses first, so I take 3 plus 5, that's 8, and then 8 plus 7 is 15, that equals the same 3 numbers, but this time we have the parentheses around the 5 plus 7 saying, okay, 5 plus 7 is 12, 12 plus 3 is 15. So it does work. It works for addition and it works for multiplication. And really, associative property deals with that grouping 2 of those 3 numbers together first. And then it doesn't matter which 2 we group together first. Okay, now what are we actually going to do with this in our assignment today? Well, the first one is more PEMDAS. So we're going to use more PEMDAS in this case. So normally when we do this, and in the book, when you get to the answers, it's going to have you state all of the properties that you're using. I am not going to make you write out the properties. I'm going to have you just do a little more of the PEMDAS. Okay, so we would first do the parentheses. So I would do 12 minus 8 first. So that would give me 4. So now I have 1/4 times 4 plus 3 times this. Okay, then our next step would be to do the next set of parentheses, which would be 15 divided by 5, which is 3. And then I would still have to do that. 3 minus 2 is 1. And this is where the using our properties comes into play. So if I have 1/4 times 4, if you go back up, 1/4 times 4 would work. That would be right here, the reciprocal. So 1/4 times 4 over 1 equals 4 over 4, which is equal to 1. So that's the multiplicative inverse. So that's what I would have written for this one right here, multiplicative inverse, if I had to write what property I used. I don't. So I'm just going to write 1 because this simplifies to 1. Then we add 3 times 1. Now everybody knows that 3 times 1 is just 3. But if you go back, that is also one of these. It's this guy right here, the multiplicative identity, because we multiply by 1 and we get the same value. So 3 times 1 is 3. So we have 1 plus 3 equals 4. Again, I'm not going to make you use those properties when you simplify using PEMDAS. So you just have to go ahead and find what that value is, evaluate it. Okay, so we just have a couple more examples here. And this again is just using those properties to simplify our work. So it's hard to read this, but it says Magina made a list of trail lengths to something, the total miles she rode. So find the total miles she rode her horse. So the trail, that Bent Knee Trail, was 4.25 miles. And then she rode Knob Hill, which was 6.50 miles. And then she rode Meadow Run, which is 9.00 miles. And then she rode the Trail Pinehurst, which was 7.75 miles. Now, I know you guys can use your calculator, so it's not that hard to add these up using your calculators. But had you not used your calculators, you might want to group this number and this number together because of the 0.25 and the 0.75. Think money, think quarters. Adding those two together makes it really easy because this gives us one whole, which means we would have 1 plus 4 plus 7, which is 12. So this is 12 miles if you group these two together. Then we can group these two together, and that would give me 6.50 and 9.00 is 15.50. So now I have 12 plus 15.50, which is kind of easy to do in my head, which is 27.50 miles. Okay, so again, you can use your calculator, so it doesn't really make sense that we use this, but I just wanted you to be aware of how you could make things a little easier by using some of these properties, because that would have been like the commutative property of addition. Okay, we're also going to do the same thing on this one. We're going to evaluate this. You don't have to name the property. But if I have 2 times 8 times 5 times 7, I'm going to rearrange it using the commutative property so that 2 times 5 is out front, because that's going to make a really easy number to multiply by. Because 2 times 5 is 10. And then if I multiply 8 times 7, I get 56. And 10 times 56 is just 560. So that's a lot easier than taking 2 times 8, which is 16, then multiplying by 5, and then multiplying that by 7. I think there's an easier way to do this. So that's what that is all about. Your homework for this assignment is page 19. It is 9 through 29 odds. And on that 9 through 29 odds, you do not have to state the properties that you're using. You just go ahead and use PEMDAS to solve it out. And 30, 48, and 61 through 64. All right, that is all I have for you.